So this in the church is what we call nepsis. And so the way you would translate that word is vigilance or watchfulness. And what is watchfulness? What does that mean? It means that I stay alert, I guard, I survey, I observe, I examine. That's really important. I examine, I oversee, I monitor, I pay attention, and I am cautious. So these are all describing the practice of watchfulness, nepsis, vigilance. So, what does that look like in our life on a daily basis? How do we practice watchfulness? Watchfulness is actually in this book, wonderful book, highly recommend it. You guys can check out all these books later on if you'd like after the class. The Art of Salvation. These are sermons given by Elder Ephraim, a modern day saint in Arizona. He says, watchfulness is a method that completely frees man with God's help from sinful thoughts, words, and actions when a person implements it continuously over time. It consists primarily of watching and examining the sinful thoughts and images that come to your mind. And as soon as they appear, dismissing them immediately. So we have to pay great attention. This is the most important thing you could do as a Christian. In addition to all the asceticism and all the rest, this is the most important. That's not my opinion. That's exactly what the saints tell us is that, you know what they say? They say that asceticism, things like fasting, prostrations, vigil, asceticism, they say, is beneficial. But they say watchfulness and the Jesus prayer is more beneficial. Actually, they say it's most beneficial. So this is really, really important. We're going to see exactly why in just a second, why this is super important to constantly pay attention as you have to force yourself because we're so distracted nowadays. We're so distracted. Technology, social media, the news, our work, our homework, all these distractions, right? Maybe some of those things are good, right? We have responsibilities, but we can't allow ourselves to be totally overtaken by those things to the point where we're not watchful because then we're going to fall into sin. So you have to force yourself to be watchful, attentive, examine your thoughts at all times so that when a sinful thought comes to mind, boom, right there, you're immediately rejecting it and chasing it away. So I was driving today from Akron, coming back from Akron, and it just popped into my head this analogy that I thought I could use to help convey this in a more practical level. So when we're driving in the car, right, we're watchful, aren't we? We're attentive. We're driving. We're making sure that we're not swerving into the other lanes and hitting other cars. We're paying attention. We're watchful, making sure that there's no deer jumping out in front of us or that there's no debris in the middle of the road that we're going to bump into, right? We might even be more attentive during the wintertime with potholes, making sure not to mess up our tires, hit the potholes, right? So we're watchful, aren't we? We practice watchfulness literally every day. So how much more should we be attentive to ourselves, to the thoughts that we have? Um, so we need to practice caution, to practice watchfulness, vigilance, to be um, kind of another way of thinking about this is in the military or the army, or imagine like in the ancient days when they had palaces and all the rest, and they had the king and the soldiers were posted out in on the premises of the palace, and the soldiers are out there they're paying attention, they're surveying the area, looking through the woods, looking through the fields to make sure there's no enemy approaching, so that if they do, they're going to shoot them right down, right? So watchfulness is exactly for us Christians. We're soldiers. We have to guard ourselves and we have to pay attention to the thoughts and images that pop in our head so that way, if and when it is sinful, if it's a sinful thought or temptation, we're immediately shooting away, shooting at it in response, right? And that's going to happen through prayer. So this is really, really, really important because every temptation that comes to us always begins in our head, always begins in our nous, in our mind. So we want to cut it off at the very root, at the very starting point, right? Because if we don't cut off the temptation the moment it pops up here, then the more it's going to progress down here, and eventually we'll carry it out through our body externally, right? Imagine I have the temptation, for example, to get really angry with someone, to cuss them out. Well, if that thought pops into my head, if I don't chase it away immediately and I let it to linger and I indulge in it, and and the blood is just really getting hot in me, and then boom, right there, I start to cuss out someone, or I start to judge them, or gossip, or criticize, or just yell at someone, whatever it is. You have to cut it off at the moment it pops up, and it always starts up here. So we have to pay close attention to our thoughts. This is exactly what Elder Frem tells us. No sin occurs in deed if an evil thought does not precede it by means of the nous. So the thought always comes first. Everything starts from the nous, meaning the mind. There is no sin which does not have the nous, the mind, as its beginning and starting point. This treason, talking about sinning with our body, first begins inwardly with our mind. We first sin with our mind. The temptation starts up here. And then it is expressed through the parts of the body. We fall into sin because of our thoughts. Therefore, let's be vigilant with thoughts. So you see how important this is. If you can conquer this, then you can conquer the rest.